Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be sharing with you how I drafted this queenanne neckline bustier. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel. Let's start. The first thing I went ahead to do was to mark my vertical measurements, which is my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to waistline. And I'm going to go ahead to outline my measurements. So after doing that, the next step I'm going to take is my shoulder measurement divided by 2 inches, which is 14 inches. Divided by 2, I have 7 inches. Adding half inch, which is 7.5, because you're going to attach sleeve to this pattern. From that part, I'll be going down by 1 inch to mark my shoulder slant or shoulder slope, anyone that you call it. So after marking it out, I'm going to go ahead to outline it with my marker so that it's going to be visible. So from there, I'm going to be getting my chest line, and to do that is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and at that line I'm going to make a straight line to indicate my chest line. So I'm just going to write CL, meaning chest line. I'll place back my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line for my armhole curve. So what I'm going to do, since my armhole curve is 7 inches, dividing it by 2, I have 3.5 inches, and I'll be going in by half from that point. So after doing that, I'm just going to place my tape at my chest line, and I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So after marking that, I'm going to place my French cuff, connect it from that half inch down to my bust circumference point I marked at my chest line. Then I'll go ahead and I will extend it down to my shoulder line, and I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline the lines that I have at that point. So the next step I'm going to take is to mark my dart intake, and to mark that, I'll place my tape and mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2 on my under bust, and I'll go down to my waistline. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches, divided by 2 I have 3.5. I'll go ahead and also mark it at my bust point, and I'll mark it also at my chest line this way. So the next step you'll be taking from there is to connect all those lines that you have made, drawing a straight line. So after drawing that, the next step you're going to be taking is to mark your dart intake at both sides. I'll go ahead and I will be marking 1 inch at both sides. So for a plus size person, you're going to go ahead to mark 1.5 inches at both sides. So after that, I will connect from that point down to the lower part at both sides of the dart. I'll go ahead and I will outline it very well so that it will be very visible. I'll place my tape at the nipple to nipple point, and I'm going to extend the line upwards a bit. For my bust line, I will be drawing my cuff on the other side, and I'll place my French cuff. I'll draw a curve connecting from my bust to my under bust, and at the other side also, I'll also place my French curve, connect from my bust line down to my under bust, and this is what I have after I'm done. And I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline the curves that I have at that point. The next thing you're going to be doing is to decide whether you want your neckline to be high or a bit lower. So if you want it to be a bit high, you can use 2 inches or more, probably 2.5 or 2 inches, or you can just go ahead and use 1.5 inches, which is still okay. What I'm going to do is just to draw a line at that 1.5 inches, which will be serving as a guide on top of that part this way. So after marking that, I will be going ahead to mark, or I'll be taking my dart intake at both sides. So I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides. So from there, I'm going to connect it to my bust point. But before I connect to my bust point, I'll go up by ½ inch. So why am I doing this? It's just to make sure that I don't have a pointy cup at that point. So what I have is 2 bends, and I'll just go ahead to retrace that part this way. So after doing it, I'm going to go ahead to draw the other side of my cup also. So I'll just place my French curve at the straight part, and I'm going to connect. So this is what I have after drawing, and I'm going to go ahead to outline it with my marker this way so that it will be very visible. You're going to decide the neckline you want. So on the thumbnail we have a sweetheart neckline, so I'm just going to connect it from that point down to my chest line this way, and this is what I have. And after marking that, so after doing that, we'll be working on the other side of the neckline. So I'll just follow that line I drew initially, and I'm going to just draw a straight line at that part. So this is what I have right now. Now we'll be working on the yoke. But before we start working on the yoke, I'm going to go ahead to insert all my measurements. I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Go ahead to mark the dart intake I took out at that point. I'll replace it and mark my sewing allowance. So whatever I have on my chest line, I'll just go ahead to replace it at my bust point, and I'll go ahead to outline or extend the line that I have at my chest line this way, and I'll just go ahead to connect from my chest line down to my bust point. So going down to my under bust point, I'm just going to place my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'll mark. Then I'll go ahead to mark the dart intake I have at that point, and I will mark my sewing allowance. Down to my waistline, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4, mark the dart intake I have at that point that I took out, then mark my sewing allowance. So what I'm going to do next is to go ahead to connect my pattern from the bust down to the under bust, and from the under bust down to the waistline. So what I'll do next is to go ahead and I will outline all my measurements from the bust down to the under bust and down to my waistline. So after this, we'll be moving up to the yoke parts of this dress, yoke parts of this particular pattern. So what I'm going to do right now is to go ahead to mark 2.5 inches for my neckline. So you can use 3 inches if you want to, but I'm going to be using 2.5. And on this part, I'm going to go ahead and mark 2.5. So note, this 2.5 is not a standard, depending on the neckline or the design you have for the Queen Anne neckline. So after marking that, I'm just going to go ahead to connect it, and this is what I have. So at the lower part, I'm just going to do a slight tightening, because after sewing you notice that the yoke part is a bit longer when you're joining it, and I'm just going to go down by 0.25 inches at that point, and I'll connect it. So when I'm cutting out, I'm just going to get rid of that small part. This is just to tighten the yoke and the dress pattern. So next, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and write yoke at that part, and I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel. So after cutting out this pattern, at this upper part, I'm just going to remove that 0.2 mark that I made. After that, I'm just going to continue cutting out all my pattern, and after cutting it out, this is what my pattern looks like, and as you can see, it is lapping at the yoke part. So next, we'll be moving over to the back pattern of this dress. So going over to my back pattern, I have gone ahead to mark out the measurement just like I did for the front, and this is my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waistline also. So I'll go ahead, place my tape from my zipper allowance. I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2 plus ½ inch, because I'm attaching sleeve for the pattern, and from there I'm just going to go ahead to take it down to my next step. I'm going to place, and I'm going to mark to get my chest line, and which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5. I'll go ahead to mark it and also mark a straight line at that point. So after marking this, I'll go ahead to write CL, meaning chest line. So to mark my dart, I'm going to place my tape at the shoulder part, and I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch, and I will make a mark at that point. So from my zipper allowance, I'll be going in by 3.5 inches. I'll mark it at my under bust at my waistline, and I will go ahead to connect those lines with my marker and I will draw a straight line. So after doing this, I'll be taking a dart intake of 1/2 inch at both sides. So after marking the 1/2 inch, I will be extending it up to that mark after my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch this way. So after I'm done doing this, so I'll go ahead to extend this line down to my chest line, which will be serving as a guide for my yoke on top. After doing that, I'll just go ahead to insert all my measurements. I'll mark my bust circumference plus my sewing allowance down to the under bust. I'm going to mark the under bust circumference. The dart intake I have at that point, I'll just measure it and replace it, and I'll mark my sewing allowance down to the waistline. I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4, measure what I have there and replace it, and go ahead to mark my sewing allowance. So after doing this, whatever I have at the bust, I'm going to take it to the chest line, and I'll go ahead to connect it from the chest line down to the bust, from the bust down to the under bust, and down to my waistline. So sorry for the double lines that I have at that point. So I'll just place my ruler and draw a straight line across my chest line, because I just want to make my back to be very simple without much going on. So I'm just going to divide what I have at the armhole, go in by 1/2 inch, and I'm going to go ahead to connect from that 1/2 inch I marked down to my chest line, and from my chest line I will be connecting it down to my shoulder line. What I'm going to do next is to place my tape, and I'm going to mark the neckline, which is 2.5 inches, the same thing I used at the back, and I will be using 1.5 inch. So for the width, so from that part I'm going to connect down to that 1.5 inches, and I'll place my ruler to just connect it down to the zipper allowance just this way. So after doing that, you're going to decide the type of yoke you want for your back. So from the neckline at the back, I will be placing my tape, and I'll mark 1 inch. You can go ahead to mark 1/2 inch, and I'll be connecting it at that line that I have at the back of my dress this way. After I'm done connecting my yoke at the back, this is what I have, and I'm going to write this as yoke. And you can go ahead to create any neckline of your choice that you want to also. So at the zipper, I'm going to go ahead to mark the back tightening to remove that bulginess at the back. So I'll go ahead and mark 1/2 inch, and I'm going to go ahead to extend it back to the upper part of my chest line. So after marking this, you can just go ahead to replace whatever you removed at the other side of your pattern if you want to. But I'm just going to go ahead and I will cut this out. So while cutting the back pattern, I'm going to be taking out 0.2 inches for my yoke side. So this is just to tighten the yoke, and I'll go ahead to cut it out when I'm cutting. So if you have any question regarding this particular pattern drafting, you can leave it at the comment section. So after drafting, this is what I have, and with this we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Thanks.